Okay, this is the Bezold effect assignment, and we're dealing with what happens visually when a color is changed. What happens to the design motif in terms of overall sense, overall personality. All right, so we'll look at this one first. The idea is coming in from what appears to be maybe a Asian-inspired idea. These are fairly complex in terms of the amount of linear structure going on within each of the octagons. And then the square areas make just a smaller counterpoint to the larger pattern pieces. So we have a monochromatic color scheme, a little bit of kind of a warm gray appearing on my screen, and then a red that is on the warm side, and then a darker red. And again, we have a fairly complex design, and with what the filled red areas are doing, they're creating a diagonal square lattice that seems to sit behind the octagons. And so the octagons are layered on top, and then we seem to be peering through these windows into the background where the red and the lighter color, that light gray, is kind of existing. So looking at this, there are a number of changes in color. We're still using 3 colors, so we've gone with the yellow. And the yellow has taken the place of the dark red over here, except that we have the dark red sitting in here. So this should be the lighter red color because we have the red, the dark red, the creamy gray, and then we have the yellow. So we have 4 colors here, and that's out of bounds. That doesn't fit the requirements. So if these little square pieces would have been the lighter red color instead of the dark red, that would have served the design well. And that's the one thing that didn't get changed. We can still see, though, that this is a very different design. This has a greater sense of flatness and density to it than this does, and obviously it warms up. It actually, on first appearance, looks like a very different design pattern and structure simply because of the color change. So what we're looking at here is an Art Deco inspired pattern, and we have the tan, the darker neutral, and the blue. And then we've changed the blue out for the orange. So we've gone a complementary direction here to make that change. This seems to have a deeper sense to it. There's a sense of visual depth. All the, we'll call them arrowheads, the Deco arrowheads are sitting on the same plane, and they are the foreground plane, and then there's a background plane, and that's true in both of them. The blue, though, creates a distancing, because blue, cool hues recede visually and warm hues advance visually. This design has a lot more depth. This is much flatter. This, with the warmth and the cool, has an opposition to it, and the blue, therefore, looks saturated. Here with the orange, we have a related scheme, and there's a lot of yellow in that tan color, and then we have the neutral, which is also a warm neutral. And then we have the saturated orange. So this is all analogous, and it's actually a little bit quieter. The value difference between the blue and the orange is negligible, so just with the change of the hue from the blue to its opposite, we haven't changed value, and therefore we haven't done a whole lot in terms of really pushing a difference in hue, value, and intensity. The blue is pushing the lighter color into a much warmer state. Here the orange is pushing it, it's neutralizing it with the blue after image. If the orange were lighter or darker, we'd really have a very different design. So for example, say we took this color and we just darkened it quite a bit, and we'll just dump that in there and see what happens. So it becomes really a very different idea. These are now appearing lighter. We can even take that darker and see what happens. So remember that with this, you can change hue, value, and intensity to make an entirely different impression just by changing out one color. Okay, just as a overall design idea, we have this kind of center section which is doing something differently than the side sections. So we've basically divided this into 3 zones. The center zone is twice as wide almost as the 2 zones on the side. And that is all because of how the we'll call them the radiant ideas coming out from the hexagons are working. We're looking also here at the negative space, seeing what shape that negative space is becoming. Here we've used the light blue, and here we've used sort of a warm, it's probably a yellow-orange. It's very tinted, maybe slightly toned, and this is a blue that looks like it's slightly toned as well. The value of the blue with the lighter green is very similar, and so we have the darker shapes coming forward, and the blue and the green kind of merge. If you squint your eye, you can kind of see how they merge together fairly closely, not exactly, but fairly closely. And with the lighter color over here, we have a tendency to focus not on the darker green area, but on that darker green with the lighter green. Because of the warmth in the background color, it's causing the green to look more saturated, both the darker and the lighter. So the opposition creates a perception of saturation, or it increases the apparent intensity, whereas over here, the blue is decreasing the apparent intensity of the green and vice versa. This has actually completed linear elements to it that we don't see in here very well. So they're there, and that actually introduces a 4th color within the design. In the idea of the details, what we want to see is an attention to the parameters of an assignment. Every design project that you're given is going to have absolutely necessary things about it. There are going to be requirements to it, and you cannot compromise the non-negotiables. With the addition of that 4th color, and we can't just say, well, it's not there or it doesn't matter, because it is there. It changes up the overall pattern and what's being repeated. You can't just say, well, it's going to be okay if it's out of bounds. Design does come with strict criteria. Things have to fit. There are certain things that cannot be neglected, and so get used to paying attention to the details. The overall design impression is that there's more visual energy on the one on the right. The one on the left is much more passive. So there is a definite change-up. There is a very strong change-up in terms of value and the appearance of intensity and the actual colors themselves. This green looks a lot lighter than this green, simply because the blue is darker. In both of these, 4 colors are also being used, so we cannot neglect the color of the linear elements. So we have red and blue and sort of a very tinted warm yellow, and we've changed out the tinted warm yellow with a dark blue, almost blue violet, that is opposite in value. So we go from a light value to a darker value, and you can see how the whole energy and basically the idea of movement is drastically different just because of that one color change. This seems to have more depth, and then the lighter blue seems to sit behind everything, so it's like we're looking through an architectural grill work. Whereas over here, everything's very flat and looks like a Tetris game surface. So we're looking at a screen on a Tetris game, which ends up being very flat looking. This doesn't have the visual depth that this does. The red here comes forward, and we're actually emphasizing the red against the darker blue and then the lighter blue. And here what's emphasized are the white, and we can definitely see the division lines, those key lines around each of the blocks. Whereas here, the horizontal lines are showing up across the blue. So again, liberties taken with the specifications. It was supposed to be 3 colors in each, and that also includes the linear elements, so be careful about the details. and how you're interpreting the requirements of an assignment. You can get really off track just in a small little detail, and you're not going to be able to serve the client well. If there are any questions about what's allowed in something, ask. And this is true when you're working with clients. You want to verify. You don't want to just make assumptions. Now, this is a simple, fairly easy assignment, but it's in the easy or the simpler assignments that you really have to watch the details, because the detail off can throw the whole thing off.